Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's 6 p.m. here Thursday evening. My name is Dr. James Lombella. I'm the CEO President for Connecticut for Animals Education Fund. We're thrilled to have you all joining us this evening for Advocacy 101. Learn the legislative process in Connecticut and how you can make a difference. Next slide. There we go. So to this evening, what we're going to cover this evening, I want to start off by thanking the Foundation of Eastern Connecticut. They are this evening's sponsor of our educational webinar, so a big thank you to the Community Foundation. We're going to do a quick introduction. I have a quick 6 slides to go through and just introduce Connecticut for Animals Education Fund. We're going to talk a little bit how to get involved, and then we're going to have a guest speaker and presentation, what we're all here for this evening. And as time permits, we will have a wrap up at the end with some question and answers. A little bit of housekeeping to go over. Please mute your microphone if it was not already muted when you joined tonight's webinar. The webinar is being recorded and it will be available on our CFA YouTube channel and our website. So I ask you please review it and share it. And we will put out an email when it is uploaded and available for everyone to view. Usually takes us a couple days to get it edited and uploaded. At the bottom of your screen, I want to make a mention to everyone, there's a Q&A button to load any questions. And again, we will review those questions at the end of the webinar as time permits. And the one big ask I have of everyone joining us this evening is share the education that you learned today with your family, your friends, your neighbors. Pass it on for the animals. Great Nelson Mandela once said, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. And that's what tonight's all about here. We're here for education, we're here for animals, and we're coming together for animals. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Real quickly, CFA's vision, Connecticut for Animals Education Fund strives to cultivate a compassionate society where animals are valued and their rights are respected, fostering a culture of empathy and responsibility towards all living things. I ask everyone check out www.ctforanimals.org, our brand new website, at Connecticut for Animals Education Fund. The website really shows how we empower, how we engage, how we educate, and how we collaborate with all of our partners across the animal welfare and educational spectrum here in Connecticut. Go to the next slide now. On our website, you're going to find all different things. Our advocacy, you'll find an education link. You'll also find ways to get involved, educate for engagement, and you will find our partner section. We also have a section that has all of our newsletters. You can view the current newsletter and the past newsletters. And we also have all of our community events listed. Throughout the last 6 months, we've been across Connecticut at several different functions going on, events across Connecticut, engaging with our members, engaging with the communities, and passing out all of our educational literature and so forth. Move to the next slide here. And just a little example right here on the left is our video educational video section, our past webinars, truth about rodent pest control, our educational webinar on animal abuse, animal cruelty. Check out the past ones. And this is where you'll also find a link once we get tonight's webinar loaded in there as well. So please check out the past ones and share them with family and friends. You'll also find all kinds of educational materials over on the right. You'll see Get the Facts. In that section, you're going to find all the different fact sheets and all the different animal issues and topics that are going on in Connecticut. And we'll jump over to the next slide here. If you're interested in volunteering, we have an event calendar that I spoke about. If you want to work with us, and also if you want to join to make sure you get those newsletters, you get those alerts, especially as we head into the legislative session for 2025 coming up. Our session starts on January 8th. Again, so the website's packed with all kinds of information. One thing I'm really excited to share is our 2024-25 CFA resource guide that was just published. It's 28 pages packed with information on animal issues and topics. You can download it for free right on our website. Please refer to this often. We're going to make sure we get that out and about in the community. We've already had thousands of these mailed across the state. Again, sharing educational materials and sharing the facts. Moving on to the next slide here. Getting into our guest speakers in tonight's presentation, I'm very excited to have two guest presenters with us from Connecticut Votes for Animals. Joshua Levin is Connecticut Votes for Animals CVA's policy and legislative intern. Joshua is a social work graduate student from UConn. He joined CFA this past summer, and he really has hit the ground running. Joshua is also leading our first public survey, which is out there, so please watch for that in your mailboxes and alerts going out. Take time to take the survey. It's open until December 31st. No, actually, January 7th, the survey is open to. I'm sorry, right before session starts. And this will help guide us, our educational materials, our offerings, and also what's most important to you, our members. He's also just getting ready to publish our 2024 legislative scorecard, so you can see how your past session, how our elected officials voted on animal topics relative to Connecticut votes for animals and what they support. So thrilled to have Joshua with us this evening. Also, our lobbyist, Alexis Barasa, is joining us. She's the communications director for Focus Government Affairs. Alexis joined Focus after graduating from the University of UConn. She has a dual bachelor's degree in communications and English and a concentration in public relations. Alexis plays a virtual role implementing, maintaining, and managing both internal and external communication efforts for the firm, and her responsibilities including tracking bills of importance for clients, facilitating their participation in public hearings, and enabling clients to effectively navigate the legislative process. So we really have someone when we get to that question and answer section. Definitely Alexis can help us with all of her experience if our viewers have specific questions that Joshua and I will be fielding at the end here. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with Advocacy 101, learn the legislative process in Connecticut, how you can make a difference. And I'm going to hand the presentation over to Connecticut Votes for Animals intern Joshua Levin. Go ahead, Joshua.
Thanks, Jim. Good evening, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for tonight's Advocacy 101 presentation, Speak Up for Animals. Let's get started. On the agenda for tonight, we're going to be reviewing the United States Federal Congress, touch upon our state Congress, go over voting in Connecticut, helping you find your legislator, going over the Connecticut General Assembly website and all there is to that, briefly touching upon the governor's duties and responsibilities, and going over why and how you should be contacting your legislator. And as Jim had mentioned, following this, there will be a discussion and Q&A portion. Before we jump into it, I do just want to highlight the 2024 legislative scorecard that CVA has just released. The scorecard highlights animal-related bills from this past session that CVA considered of high priority. A few bills that we included in here, as you can see on the screen: Senate Bill 132, an act concerning dog racing. That's all about closing the loophole that was within state law that allowed dog racing to continue, even though there hasn't been a dog racing track open since 2005. And another bill included is Senate Bill 196. That is all about the bill is about expanding rabbit meat production, which CVA was staunchly opposed to. CVA, along with animal advocate organizations, partners, people, were able to successfully defeat this bill as it did die on the Senate calendar. Scan that QR code on the bottom right to be able to go to CVA's website and download the scorecard. So, our federal Congress. The federal Congress is made up of two chambers: the lower chamber, the House of Representatives, and the upper chamber, the Senate. The House of Representatives serve a fixed term of 2 years, and the Senate serves a fixed term of 6 years. All seats in the House, all 435 voting members, are up for re-election every 2 years, whereas in the Senate, 1/3 of the 100 voting members are up for re-election every 2 years. The number of representatives a state has in the House depends on its population. When our Constitution was written, it was set out that there would be one representative for roughly every 30,000 people. But as the population of the country grew, so did concerns about the size of the House. And so in 1929, it was capped at 435 voting members that we have today. Every 10 years, we have the census, and with the census comes reapportionment. Reapportionment is where states are informed of how many representatives their state will have. The last time that was relevant to Connecticut was in the year 2000, when following the census, our representatives went from 6 to 5. There are 6 non-voting members in the House. There are 5 delegates that represent Washington, D.C., Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. And then there is 1 resident commissioner that represents Puerto Rico. There are 2 senators for every state. An interesting fact about the Senate is that from its inception in 1789 up until 1913, senators were appointed by their state legislator. With the 17th Amendment that passed in 1913, that made the position of senator an elected position by the popular vote. In the House, a party needs 218 members to have a majority, and in the Senate, a party needs 51 members to have a majority. Here you can see the Connecticut federal Congress districts, or excuse me, for the House of Representatives. The first district is represented by John Larson, the second by Joe Courtney. The third district is represented by Rosa DeLauro. The fourth district by Jim Himes, excuse me. And our fifth congressional district is represented by Johanna Hayes. We also have two senators, Richard Blumenthal and Chris Murphy. When it comes to our state Congress, similar in that there are two chambers, the House of Representatives and the Senate. It differs in that both the House and the Senate members serve a fixed 2-year term. So all 151 voting members in the House and all 36 voting members in the Senate are up for re-election every 2 years. In the House, each district is comprised of approximately 24,000 constituents, and in the Senate, each is about 100,000. In the House, a party needs 76 members to hold a majority, and in the Senate, a party needs 19. This past November, with the election, Democrats gained 4 more seats in the state House, and they gained 1 more seat in the state Senate. By gaining those 4 seats in the state House, that gave them a veto-proof majority, meaning, and they already had one in the Senate. So that means that they hold the 2/3 necessary to override a veto from the governor and don't need bipartisan support in order to override. Let's talk about voting in Connecticut. There are 3 main ways of voting in Connecticut. Voting early, where you vote in person before Election Day at your municipality's voting location. You can vote by absentee ballot, and you can request one or are eligible for one for the following reasons. And you can vote on Election Day. One thing I would like to note is that if you voted in this past election, you would have noticed the question on the ballot about no excuse voting. That measure did actually pass, but that doesn't mean it automatically goes into effect. It just means that now legislators are able to propose a bill that allows for it. So currently, the only way to request an absentee ballot is by being eligible due to the following reasons. When it comes to Election Day, that is your traditional way of voting. Your polling location does vary based upon your home address. And Connecticut does have what's called same-day registration, or SDR. It is important to note, though, that if you want to go this route, registering on Election Day, your same-day registration location differs from your regular polling location. If you go this route and you go to your SDR location and register there, you will actually cast your vote there as well, so you won't need to go to your polling location later on. There isn't a dedicated site where you can find out where your SDR location is for your town or city, and so I would recommend planning in advance, calling your town hall or city hall, and figuring out where that location is and making a plan for yourself. Down here on the bottom left, this QR code, if you scan that, it does bring you to My Vote Connecticut. That's where you can check your voter registration status or register to vote. You can find your polling location, you can view a sample ballot, and you can do a lot more there as well. And the QR code on the right, that brings you to where you can request an absentee ballot. I do just want to mention that throughout this presentation, we do have a few QR codes. You don't need to worry about scanning them now. We are recording this. This is going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel on the CVA page. And so you will be able to refer back afterwards, pause the page where you want to, and get the resources that you need. So now that we've talked about voting, let's talk about registering to vote. If you plan on registering by mail, you do need to get that in the mail 18 days before an election. That's a primary or a general election. It needs to be post-stamped in the mail 18 days prior to. You're eligible to vote in Connecticut if you're at least 17 and turning 18 on or before Election Day, if you're a U.S. citizen and live in Connecticut, and if you've completed confinement if you're convicted of a felony. If you scan that on the bottom right, that brings you to this page. And to get started, just choose your language of preference. You go into step 2, and here you can choose between new voter registration or change voter registration. You're going to select new voter if it's your first time registering or if you've moved to a new town. And you'll choose change voter registration if you have moved within the same town of the last registered address that you had, if you have changed your name, or if you want to change the party that you are enrolled in. So you fill that out, and here you include some personal information. And that brings you to step 3, where you're just going to include your current home address and your current mailing address if that differs. And step 4 is where you're going to choose if you want to enroll in a political party or not. Connecticut does have closed primaries, meaning that the only way that you're able to vote in a Connecticut primary is by enrolling in a political party. So let's say you decide to enroll as a Democrat. That means that you now have the option to vote in a Democratic primary. And what is a primary? A primary is when there are two or more candidates from the same political party that are running for the same office. So if your town has two Democratic candidates running for mayor, you'll have a primary before the general election. In that primary, if you're registered as a Democrat, you'll choose who you would like to represent the Democratic Party, and then the winner of that will go up against presumably the Republican candidate for mayor of your town. Also include here some general information and your registered vote. So now we wait the necessary time. I'd give about 10 days for your information to populate within the database. And now we want to check whether or not it's good if you are registered to vote. So you go here, scan that QR code on the bottom right, brings you to the voter registration lookup, include your town, last name, first name, and date of birth. Click voter registration search, and you'll see down below whether you are registered. You'll see the party that you're registered with, and you'll also see your polling location address. This is something that I do before every election, just to be certain that my polling location is the same and it hasn't changed. So now how do you find your legislator? Scan that QR code, brings you to find your legislators. And in here, you're going to include your town, street name, and address number. Click find, and you will see your 5 legislators that represent you. Every Connecticut citizen has 5 legislators. There is the state rep, the state senator, your federal rep, and your 2 federal senators. Now, if you want to learn more about your legislators, you can click on their name here, and it'll bring you to their webpage where you can find all the information necessary about them. Very important thing to know about your legislator is what committees that they're on. Every legislator, state and federal, is a member of at least one committee, typically more than one. And so if you are looking to find your state representative committee assignments, a good example is here. Carrie Wood is a Democratic rep and Holly Cheeseman is a Republican rep. Both of their committee assignments are included in their header on the top of their webpage. If you want to search for a state senator, on the left is Julie Kushner, a Democrat. On the right is Stephen Harding, a Republican. You can find any state senator that is a Democrat's committee assignments right there, right below the picture. And for Republicans, you click their about in their header and you can see their committee assignments underneath their photo. Another way to find committee composition, committee members, is by going to the CGA website. In the header, you can click on committees. That will show you all 27 committees that are a part of the CGA. And from there, if you click on, let's say, the Environment Committee, you can choose the committee membership, and that will show you the full composition of the committee. All committees are joint, meaning that senators and representatives comprise each committee. Now, if you want to search for your federal representatives, you can follow the QR code affiliated with the person on the screen, and that will bring you to the relevant page where you can find more about them, including their committee assignments. And same goes for our federal senators, Blumenthal and Chris Murphy. So now let's talk about the Connecticut General Assembly. The Connecticut General Assembly alternates between long and short sessions. Long sessions happen during odd years, so this one coming up in 2025 takes place from January to June. Short sessions, like the one in 2024, February to May. During long sessions, typically the priority is to pass your state budget that is in effect for the next 2 years, and any legislator is able to propose any legislation. In your short sessions, like the one in 2024, the primary focus is budget revisions, and only committees are able to raise bills. And so we're talking about raising bills and proposing legislation. Well, that begs the question, how does a bill become a law? There are myths about how a bill becomes a law, and the typical myth is that it is easy, that it is a seamless transition between the idea being proposed, going into a committee and it's drafted, that goes to the House where it's passed, through to the Senate seamlessly, onto the governor's desk, and it's signed into law. That is never the case, unfortunately. The reality is that it is a much more complex process. It starts with a bill champion. Every bill has a bill champion or a sponsor or a bill introducer. Ideas for these bills can come from the legislator, and they can also be brought to them by you, the public, a person, a group, an organization. It is important to note the sheer amount of bills that are introduced each session. In the most recent short session this year, there were 1,471 bills introduced, 283 of which saw it through from start to finish being enacted into law, which is 19% of all the bills. In the most recent long session, over 3,600 bills were introduced, 411 of which were passed into law, which is 11%. So getting a bill passed, as you can see, is very complex and it is very difficult. You need the support from both the legislator and from the public. The bill needs to be marketable. Think about it as if you're trying to sell a product, and in this case, the bill is the product. It needs to be attractive. You need to be able to sell the bill to the public and to the other legislators. So our bill champion here introduces the bill. It then goes to a committee. All bills are referred to committees. Here, it is formally written out by the legislator commissioner's office, and once it makes it back to the committee, that's when a public hearing is scheduled and held. And that's where you all come into play. Anyone is able to give public testimony, either by going to the legislative office building in Hartford and presenting in front of the committee, or writing and submitting it on the CJA website. It is important to note that when you plan on submitting public testimony, you do need to register ahead of time. You can register by going to the CGA website, finding the daily bulletin on the home screen, and searching for the public hearing of the bill that you're interested in. And from there, it's very easy. You just follow the instructions to submit your testimony. There are instances where a bill needs to go through multiple committees. Let's say a bill starts in like the Environment or the Judiciary Committee, two highly relevant committees pertinent to CBA. If a bill starts there and has a financial component attached to it, then typically that bill will go through the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee as well. In each committee that a bill goes through, the committee gives the bill either a favorable report, an unfavorable report, or they take no action on it at all. When that happens, it's referred to as the bill dying in committee. If the bill gets its favorable report, it makes its way out of committee and to the House of Representatives or the Senate. A bill needs to be passed by both the House and the Senate. At this phase in the game, sometimes amendments are added to the bill, and that's just a slight change from the original text of the bill. If an amendment is added after it has already been passed by one of the chambers, the bill then needs to go back to that chamber. So let's say a bill starts in the House of Representatives and pass, and then it goes over to the Senate. In the Senate, deliberation happens and an amendment is added. It then passes in the Senate, and then needs to make its way back down to the House of Reps to be passed again. Both chambers need to agree on the same text and pass the same bill, the same language. If the two chambers can't agree on the bill, rather than the bill just going back and forth, it is sent to a special joint committee. Here, a compromise report is created, and if both chambers agree to the compromise, it passes. And if they don't, it dies. If it does pass both chambers, it then makes its way to the governor's desk. The governor gets the bill and they either sign it into law or they veto it. This is where the veto-proof majority that the Democrats now hold within both the House and the Senate matter, in that they are able, without bipartisan support, able to override any veto that the governor puts forth by having that two-thirds majority. So a good example of this process is Senate Bill 132 from this past session. CBA did support this bill as it closed the loophole that allowed Greyhound racing to continue. And over here on the right, you'll see the start to finish actions that were taken on this bill. It took 84 days for this bill to pass into law, and in that time, it made its way through the bipartisan process. A more visually easy way of viewing this is here, where you'll see that the bill went from public hearing, passed through committee, made its way over to the Senate and passed, made its way to the House and passed, and then was signed into law by Governor Lamont. While this seems like a long and drawn out process, 84 days is not a short amount of time. This is actually a more streamlined example of a bill becoming a law. In this instance, the bill didn't need to go through multiple committees. There were no amendments that were added to the bill. The bill didn't need to be sent to a special joint committee, so no compromise report was needed, and the governor didn't veto it. This is not the typical case. So how do we search for a bill? Searching for a bill, you go to the Connecticut General Assembly website, bill info, you go over to bill information search, where you are able to search by a multitude of different ways. You can search by session year. You can search for keywords in the title, and you can also search the most recent action on the bill. You can search by party or by chamber, and you can search by committee. You can search by the representative that either introduced or co-sponsored it, and same goes for senator. And then you can also search by bill range. Senate bills start in the 100s and House bills start in the 5000s. In this case, we're going to continue with the example of the dog racing bill. So you search that and you will find Senate Bill 132. There's one other way of searching for a bill. You go to bill info, quick bill search, or down on the bottom, it pops that up. You type in the number, so long as it's in the right year, 132, and that brings you to the page for the bill and act concerning dog racing. Here, you're able to find any votes that were taken on it, either by a committee or by the House or Senate floor, and you're also able to see the text of the bill, among other things. And so now how do we track these bills? To track a bill, scan that QR code. It brings you to the CGA bill tracking site, where you do need to create an account, though the account is free. There are multiple ways of tracking a bill, including searching by introducer, co-sponsor, the specific bill, like in this case on the right, you'll see Senate Bill 132, and you can also search by keywords. So if you're interested in searching for bills that have the word animal in it, then you can search by by using that keyword, you will find any bill that has that word in it. You can also, on the top right of the screen, see that list name is dog racing. You can have multiple lists going at one time. As we know, in a long session like what's coming up, there will be upwards of 3,000 bills introduced. And so sorting by different lists will make it a much more efficient and easy process. From here, if we click View Print List, we get all of the necessary information that we need on our bills. You'll find the bill number, name, and the statement of purpose. You can see its actions on the House and Senate calendar, the public hearing date, and the most recent committee action taken, also House, Senate, and governor actions. So we have spoken briefly about the governor, and we can quickly review the powers and responsibilities that the governor has. A few that are relevant to CVA include appointing state positions and offices, signing or vetoing bills passed by the state legislature, and being able to convene or adjourn state legislatures during emergencies. Since 1965, when the most current state constitution was ratified, governors have served 4-year terms with no term limits. And a term limit is like with the United States president, they're able to serve 2 4-year terms. The power to veto isn't used all that often, at least recently. In 2024, the governor vetoed 2 bills, and in 2023, the governor vetoed 5 bills. So how and why should you contact your legislature? Well, for starters, change starts at the bottom and it works its way up. So it starts with you guys. Animals also don't have a voice, and so we need to be able to speak up for them. Legislators have a duty and an obligation to represent you, not themselves, not the corporations, not the lobbyists, but you. How we talked about anyone being able to be the inspiration for a bill, well, they won't know about the ideas that you have if you don't speak up, if you don't contact them. And Desmond's Army is a perfect example that contacting them works. After animal advocates in 2012 saw the apathetic approach that the courts had towards animal cruelty cases, specifically a case involving Desmond, a pit boxer mix who was murdered by his guardian's ex-boyfriend, they decided to take a stand. They protested, they advocated, and they were able to gain media coverage and eventually champion a bill titled Desmond's Law. It was passed in October 2016, and that law allows court-appointed advocates to represent the interests of animals in these cruelty cases. Abused animals would then have their own representation, and they can now have a voice to the torture and torment that they endured. Since 2016, Desmond's Law has become a national model, and several other states have passed very similar legislation, including close by in Maine, where it's called Frankie's Law. And so how do you contact your legislator? Outside of the useful numbers on the bottom, where you can contact your state Dems, your Republicans in both the House and the Senate, it can be a little bit intimidating. And so starting small is just as important as contacting them. Your local elected officials, including your Board of Education members and your town and city council members, have a direct impact on you and your way of life. And so figure them out. Search your Board of Education members, find out when their committee meetings are, figure out what they're talking about, gain some opinions on it, do your research, and come ready. You can also find a bill that you're passionate about that the CGA will have going on. Find out where that is in committee. Find out when a public hearing is. Write up your testimony and submit it, either in person or written. And you can also join a movement. Desmond's Army is a perfect example of movements that work. One thing to note is that the legislative office building can be a little bit intimidating, and you must remember that that building and those people are there for you. They represent you. That building is yours. It isn't something to walk into thinking that it isn't yours, it's foreign. That is your building. Keep that in mind when you guys make it to the LOB in the future. Before we wrap up, I do just want to mention Get Political for Animals and Win the Laws That They Need, written by Julie Lewin. Julie Lewin has been a staunch advocate for animals for over 40 years. She has worked as a lobbyist, a grassroots organizer, and an educator. And she has founded Animal Advocacy Connecticut and then later the National Institute for Animal Advocacy. She has educated advocates in day-long workshops to groups around the country on how to effectively advocate for animals in their state, and has recently written Get Political for Animals. It's an easy-to-follow manual on why and how to launch a voting block in your area. The QR code on the bottom right will bring you to NEFA's website, where you can enter a few bits of information and receive your free digital copy of this book. I've done so myself, and I will say that it is a great, easy read with a plethora of information. We made it. Thank you so much for sticking around. I appreciate you guys hanging in with us and learning about how to advocate effectively for animals in the state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Excellent, Joshua. I can tell you what a thorough, comprehensive presentation you forward tonight for all of us. Truly, lots of great information. Can't thank you enough for taking the time and to put this together for Connecticut Votes for Animals and to be our presenter here at Connecticut for Animals Education Fund. I do also want to thank the Community Foundation again. And as we launch into some question and answers, we definitely have some time for them. I'm looking over here at our Q&A block, and I'm reminding the audience, if you have a question, now's the time to go ahead and load them. We do have a first question here, and it might actually be for Alexis, because I'm not sure on this one either. The question comes from our viewer, Lori. Lori's asking, why isn't there an animal welfare committee? So I'm not, committees are born and how they are put into place and so forth. Alexis, I'm not sure if you know that. Um,
Yeah, so committees are determined by leadership of the respective majority caucuses. This year, actually, they have added another committee. So the number of committees does fluctuate based on what leadership does want and does allow. We do have an animal welfare caucus, which is kind of a bipartisan subgroup of the legislature. One of the founding members of the Animal Welfare Caucus, Representative David Michel, unfortunately did not win he did not win re-election, so he will not be here this upcoming session. So the fate of the caucus does kind of remain unknown. Representative Nicole Claridis Ditria, the co-chair of the caucus, is still around, and I know she's trying to revive the caucus. So there are many supporters, a lot of quiet supporters up at the legislature. So can't express to you all enough how important it is to get to know even your hometown legislators before an issue arises, and let them know that you're a supporter of animals, or let them know what issues may concern you. So that way, when you do head up to the legislature to testify, and I did see a comment on there asking how long testimony should be. So I'll get around to answering that. But we like to say you should get to know your legislature before you go to them with an ask. That way they get to know you on a personal level, and reach out to those who you may know have an interest in animal groups as well, so that you have some allies going into this legislative session. As for if you don't mind, I'll just answer the question on how long public hearing testimony should be. If you are going to be speaking, they limit you to 3 minutes. So a few pages of testimony before they cut you off. However, if you're submitting written testimony, that can be as long as you want. We do recommend keeping your main points in the first page, because a lot of legislators will unfortunately lose interest or stop reading after a while. But keeping it short and to the point is best.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well, Alexis. Definitely, you want it to be short and have your main points right up front because, like you said, legislators are only going to read a certain amount before they're moving on to the next one. So, some great advice there. Also, some great advice on the committees, and we certainly hope the Animal Caucus, is revived and continues to move forward with its good work. We do have another anonymous attendee has written, when does a bill go to the Senate versus the House first? Alexis, thoughts on that?
That's a good question. One of the best ways to determine or see how that moves is like Joshua said, Senate bills always start with 100 numbers. So if there's any bill, for example, an act concerning dog racing, Senate Bill 132. So if it starts in those lower numbers, it always goes to the Senate first. If it's a 5,000 number, it always starts in the House and then goes to the respective other chamber. Numbers are determined mostly by the legislator who presented the bill, or sometimes if it's a short session, if it's a committee bill, it just depends on whose priority bill it is, and that's how numbers are sometimes determined. So again, those lower numbers always goes to the Senate first. The 5,000s and up always go to the House first.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that. All right. Viewer Christine, hi Christine. It has a question here. Is there anything you would not recommend that advocates do? Alexis, I'm sure you see this often too. Things that what are some of the takeaways that you've learned that really telling advocates, turns legislators off or just really makes them glaze over and stop listening?
Um, Keeping it short and to the point is always, like I said, super important because legislators have a million things on their mind. And while you're advocating for some super important issues, they also have 40 other issues that they're hearing from 40 other advocates. So keeping it short-winded, always something that is recommended. Keeping it long-winded, not recommended. And being persistent. There is a fine line between being persistent and being annoying. You want to make sure that you get your point across and follow up with your legislator without harassing them. We have seen before that there will be people who, after receiving an answer, they'll just keep going back, keep going back, keep going back. And the legislator is just like, you know what, I'm done. And unfortunately, that happens more times than you think. So just walking that fine line of advocating and being persistent without being overbearing and borderline harassing the legislator. So those are two super important things. And then just keeping it friendly. They're people too. Most of the time they want to have a conversation with you. They want to hear from you. So just keeping a keeping it on a personal level and keeping that lightheartedness is always something we do recommend, as opposed to the contrary.
Yeah, I would certainly definitely say in all my experience up at the LOB for many years, being respectful to me is really the most key thing. I've seen people you get so passionate about what your issue is that sometimes that passion can come across as almost being a little aggressive or a little angry So I always tell people try and keep yourself in check and just this person is here to help. You're having a conversation with your elected official. The more respect you can convey along with that passion, and like you said, there's that fine line of not stepping over the line and becoming annoying. So you got to kind of keep yourself in check as passionate as we can be about some of these topics. We have to understand these individuals are also being hit. And to see that sheer number of bills coming across each session, if you can imagine, there's a handful of advocates for every one of those bills hitting up each one of these legislators. So you've got to, I can only imagine what their a day in the life what it would be like for them and all of that coming at you. So some great advice there, Alexis. Thank you for that. Moving on here, we do have one from Erica. Let's see. Is there a way to see a list of laws going into effect in the new year?
They are listed online. Many of the bills that did pass this past session had several different effective dates. So I know a handful went into effect in October, a few went into July. So all the ones that are up until this point, I'm happy to relay that information along. They are posted. I just need to find that exact website link. So I'm happy to share that with Joshua and Jim as well.
Sure, and we'll make sure we get that on the link that goes out for this video. We'll include where that the link to find the laws going into effect in the new year. I know CVA did just publish and has on their website animal laws that went into effect. I think October 1st there was a set of laws that went into effect in 2024, and there's a few others. So we certainly try and track those and let the public know when those are coming into effect as well. All right. Irene has a question here. Our viewer Irene, when are the committees announced? I know the leadership has been made public. So when should we know the committees?
As far as committee leadership, so the House and Senate chairs, the Senate did announce their Senate chairs of each committee, so those have been posted. The House is lagging a little bit. They have about 5 or 6 that have been confirmed, but we should hopefully be seeing House leaders, a full list of House leaders announced within the next few weeks. As far as committee membership, it tends to vary, considering that leadership of committees has not been confirmed. We can expect that to take a little bit longer, hopefully before the new year, though.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. All right. We have viewer Gina has, what is the best way to start to research the laws that pertain to animals? For example, I'm interested in learning more about the care required for animals in town shelters.
I think starting at a local level is always super beneficial. Get to know what's going on in your community first and get to know your legislator. That will be the first step of action, at least in my opinion. Because even though Connecticut's a small state, there's a lot going on and every community is different. So really recognizing what's happening in your community and maybe even your neighbors' communities is super important. On a state level, attending webinars like Connecticut Votes for Animals is putting on right now, joining different advocacy groups, joining different social media pages. That's a great way to get to know what's going on, because thousands of bills come through every single session. So it's impossible to know what every single bill is, but joining groups such as this and just paying attention is a great way to narrow down what issues are important, especially on a macro level.
Absolutely. And I do know that we have on the CVA, I know CVA has on their website legislative priorities, past sessions, and so forth as well too. So several listings of past bills that have gone through. So you certainly can start doing some research right on the Connecticut Votes for Animals website for bills that have been put into place and ones that are coming. Great. Emily, let's see. We have a viewer. Emily has a question. Are there any current bills coming up in the next session that CVA considers to be the highest priority? I can tell you CBA's, priority list. We will be playing defense on, or they will be playing defense on quite a few different things, along with Connecticut for Animals Education Fund. Biggest thing is rodenticides, SGARs coming up here. Also, we're keeping a close eye on things, puppy mills. If rabbit farming is going to come up again, if bear hunting is going to surface again, there's things that we'll have to definitely play defense on those. Of course, expansion of Desmond's Law would be wonderful here in Connecticut to expand that to more animals as well. So hopefully that answers your question. But a lot of it in the legislative session too is, like I said, playing defense or just really watching what's coming up and all those bills. If they get a sponsor, if they come forward, if they have a public hearing and so forth, we'll definitely send those alerts out so that members know when those hearings are happening, when those votes are taking place, and which topics are surfacing this legislative session. But I think those are going to be the biggest ones, at least that CVA is monitoring at this point. So thanks for the question there. Christine, let's see here. Hey, Christine, great for joining us. Please remind people that speaking testimonies can be done via Zoom and do not require one to go live. Many cannot commit to the day off to participate in Zoom effectively. And a great point, Christine, absolutely. And Alexis, I'm sure this legislative session they're going to continue ever since COVID now to have the testimonies being presented, via virtually. And we certainly, if you're in line, you can find out when it's coming and only be able to log in at a certain time. It's a much more easy to manage, as Christine has said here, to log in and give a testimony and also submit written testimony. And go ahead, Alexis. Looks like you were going to say something potentially on this as well.
Just agreeing with you. That's a great point, Christine. It's been a great offer that the legislature has provided to allow people to testify via Zoom. It's much more convenient and allows many more voices to be heard.
Excellent, excellent. I agree. Colette has joined us too, the chair of and president of Connecticut Voice for Animals board, and Colette has given outstanding so much information. We can use our voice to speak up for animals, and this information guides the way to do that. So thank you, Colette. Thank you, Joshua, and Alexis. Again, this is certainly empowering people. And our members as we move forward here. A couple more questions. I'm keeping an eye on time here. Karen had a question. Let's see here. I'd like to see someday a way for wildlife rehabbers to receive state and or federal monies to assist with the emergency care of our wildlife. How best to proceed? Boy, I wholeheartily agree with that. Any thoughts on that, Alexis? I mean, I know I think we have to go after both municipality funding and also state funding at a state level to help out some of these rehabbers. Absolutely, and the great work that they're doing. Go ahead, Alexis.
No, definitely. Just being present at the Capitol is a great way to just as an initial step to get your voice heard and talking to some of the people, even in the governor's office or his staff. I will just note that the upcoming years, there is going to be a little bit of tension within the legislature regarding fiscal guardrails. There's not too much money to go around, but being active and being up at the Capitol and showing the importance of what this money can do is a great step forward. And there are many different ways to go about doing so. There's bond money, which bond requests can be made. There's budget requests. So just being there, being heard, making those requests at public hearings is a great start.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Alexis. Lori has a question here. Does CFA have any plans to go into schools for humane education and animal welfare? Absolutely. Connecticut for Animals Education Fund. We've just passed our 7 month in existence. We've been across 9 different events across the state this summer, as well as multiple educational webinars put on for the public. We continue to set our sites bigger and grow. We plan on engaging our college population, our students, student clubs, and so forth as we move forward. So Lori, for your question, absolutely, we were growing, and we plan on getting there as our organization moves forward, not only into schools but also into some public libraries, senior centers. There's many ways we can outreach to our community members to spread education for animal welfare. We have an anonymous question here. Despite Desmond's law, are animals, especially domestic animals, still ultimately perceived to be the property in the eyes of the law? Yes, the question that as far as from what I know, from what I've read so far, they are considered property. And that is one of the issues that our animal law advocates continue to deal with. And that's why Connecticut has become one of the leaders in the country, having animal advocates in the courtroom actually representing the animal's best interest, and so forth. So we definitely have some work to do with, and last year I know they tried to change the definition of animals, which certainly would have had a negative impact. And we were able to play defense on that as well. Let's see here. Another question, keeping an eye on time. Are there groups that we can join to help forward certain causes? Absolutely joining groups such as Connecticut Votes for Animals, Connecticut for Animals Education Fund, the Humane League, multiple things, multiple partners. I would say on the last page of our resource guide, we have an entire page of partners listed there, which people can reference as well, but just getting involved here in the state. And we do put out several alerts and opportunities when there's opportunities to get involved at the Capitol, and certainly with legislation and stuff as well. Looking at a couple of the other questions here, another anonymous one. Is there any way to know if outside influences lobbyists are impacting the way legislators vote on bills? Thoughts on that one, Alexis?
Well, I think first off, there isn't really a great way to know if this is happening. I mean, a lot of conversations do happen behind closed doors, but being up at the Capitol, I can say there are a lot of lobbyists who have conversations with legislators, and same goes for special interest groups like all of you as well. So lobbyists tend to be the eyes and ears of the organization, so we can presume that this is happening. Oh, I just muted myself. I'm sorry there. But I will note that lobbyists tend to be the eyes and ears on the ground. So having some meaningful conversations and educating those legislators can be very positive. It's often looked at as a negative occupation, but for people who can't make it up to the Capitol or just providing, like I said, those second set of eyes and ears, or having a conversation with the legislator who had preconceived notion that was going against something that you all believed in, can be super helpful as well.
Sure. Excellent. Excellent. Alexis, can you see the one from Irene? I can't. Irene sent over a link. Thank you, Irene, a member viewer here that says it looks like it's a CT Mirror article, legislative session committee leaders. So this must be the article. So it looks like in CT Mirror there is an article that lists the session leaders, committee leaders.
Yes, so I do see that link, and it does list, looks like 8 committees. I believe there's 12 or 14 total committees. So we are still waiting on a few. But to that point, Representative John Michael Parker is the new committee chair of the Environment Committee. He is replacing Representative Joe Gresco, so we do have a fresh mind coming in, and Senator Rick Lopes will be the Senate chair as well. So some good allies in that committee.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Alexis. All right, moving on. Next question. Jenna, can you give us talking points for how to discuss rodenticides? Absolutely, Jenna. Right on Connecticut for Animals Education Fund. If you go to that link on the fact sheets where it says facts, click on education, then click on facts. One of the first fact sheets that come up is the fact sheet on rodenticides. It actually comes up with a whole page on resources. It'll take you to a place called Hope. It'll take you to multiple locations. All of us have fact sheets on the facts about SGARs, how they're getting into the food stream, how they're poisoning, secondary poisoning taking place. Also, I want to say on our please go back to the video section when you're in the webpage as well. Our last webinar, thank you, Christine Cummings, again, a place called Hope, and Nicole Rivard, Friends of Animals, presented with us. And of course, our Bard Owl Zen was there and presented a full video presentation on SGAR. So please watch that. It's in our video library. You can pull it right up. It'll give you multiple talking points on how to talk to your legislator, how to talk to your landlord, how to talk to your condo association, your local Walmart or whatever you find a black box around. There's actually even Christine's site has some wonderful things you can print out and give right to an owner, a business owner who might not know the ramifications of those black boxes that are around their building and what they're doing to the entire environment and so forth. So great question. Lots of information and talking points for you there, and reach directly out to me if you like some more talking points or want to have a conversation on it. We also have another question here. Is it true pet stores are not allowed to sell animals? That is false. Pet stores in Connecticut can sell animals, can sell dogs and cats. Recently, New York outlawed the sale of dogs and cats in pet stores, and we're finding a lot of pet stores moving over the border into Connecticut, where it's still legal to sell dogs and cats in pet stores. And we're running into lots of issues with that, as we know, certainly supporting puppy mills, and just really setting families up for a lot of heartache with animals and so forth. So that is a false statement. All right, Holly, well, what would we have to do to have animals not be considered as property? Well, that definitely goes into legislation. That goes into the definition of animal that we talked about. And again, we're going to watch that closely as it comes up this session if they try to change the definition of an animal. And certainly, if we can get a sponsor as we move forward in this session and next session, to be able to take a look at that exact topic, animals being a property and how they're viewed from the law. Great question, Holly. Thank you. Kathy has a question. Um, let's see here. I'm not on your email list. Will you alert me to bills concerning animals that are being considered? We will, I would say, please join and get on our email list. CVA puts out alerts for all of the bills that are coming up for animals that they're supporting or that we're asking folks not to support. So the best way to get that notification and alert would be to sign up for the CVA and CFA organizations, and those alerts will come out on a regular basis throughout the session. Let's see, we got a shout out from Lori. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Lori, for the shout out. Colette, yes, still property. And Colette, of course, a lawyer here lets us know that that is still, the animals are still considered property. We do not see many cases prosecuted appropriately. Why? Why does it seem these cases do not get prosecuted as they should? Alexis, any thoughts on that one? I mean, I just know, I think that we're not, and I talk about this often, and so does CVA, and so does Connecticut for Animals, that often that we're not, so we're getting consecutive terms, we're getting the sentencings that don't go hand in hand with the magnitude and harm, cruelty that's been done to the animal and so forth. So I absolutely agree that we need to get some stronger convictions. We need to, and we have had a few in the news. I know we did have a few individuals serve some time and so forth. I think Connecticut's getting better, but we have a long ways to go to make sure that they're getting the proper sentencing on these. So what we have to do, obviously, talk to, as we were just talking about, talk to your elected official. Let them know how disheartened you are on some of these sentencings for animals, and that needs to be taken at a more serious level here in Connecticut. And go ahead, Alexis. I see you turned off your mic.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I can't really speak to the legal reasons why this happens, but just relaying that information to your legislature is imperative in letting them know that these issues are important and these people deserve to be prosecuted. And I think enforcement is just a huge issue all around. Unfortunately, there are not enough bodies. And we see this all across the board with several different issues. So just making sure that your legislator knows that this needs to be enforced and these issues are imperative, because a lot of times animal abuse goes hand in hand with other serious things such as domestic violence. So just reiterating that to your legislator is important.
Yeah, absolutely. On our animal cruelty webinar, we went into the link between domestic violence, partner abuse, child abuse. There's an absolute solid link between animal abuse. I believe it was most of every one of the school shooters who became school shooters had background and younger indications of animal abuse in their younger years. So it definitely is an indicator. So if we can start paying closer attention to these issues, we might be able to prevent some even bigger issues from happening. So some great advice there. Let's see a couple more. Christine, I'm in Massachusetts, and as Alexis said, working on the local level can work. We passed a rodenticide bylaw in our town of Arlington. Oh, that's great to hear. So they had a local ordinance law passed about rodenticides as well. So great work, Christine, on that. So it shows the power of being local and getting involved locally. Let's see here. Another question here. Given the dire situation of rescues now being full, are there any emergency legal measures or funds that can be used to handle this burden in the communities? It seems like a state of emergency. Yes, and we saw our ACOs put out a statement this year about this exact issue. And again, this goes back to, as we're having these conversations with your elected officials, let them know your stance on this. We've been making it said multiple times. We are in a state of emergency. There is a dire situation going on here in Connecticut. And we have to get our arms around that. We do have several organizations meeting together. CVA, CFA is at the table as well as we start tackling these as we look forward, because we have to do something about this. It's just continuing to get worse as we move forward. So I agree with that. And let's see here. Holly, thank you for the frequent webinars. These are so informative and important. Education, knowledge, education is power. Thank you, Holly, for that. And Colette, still a long way to go in education, need training to in the link of violence in the judicial system. Wholeheartedly agree, Colette. Absolutely. When you look at the link for those, like I said, to domestic animal violence and domestic violence link, it's in the 85th, 90th percentile. There is a direct link there. Um, let's see here. Anonymous. I've had many conversations with my elected officials, and they say it's not their domain. So now what? I'm not sure what's not their domain. The animal issues or so forth. I would push back when an elected official says that to you, that you are my elected official and these are my concerns. And again, have that conversation, almost like Alexis said. At some point, we have to continue to be persistent. We don't want to become annoying, but don't take no for an answer. And it is their domain. Anything that impacts Connecticut laws and legislation, if they're an elected official, they have power to make change. All right, it looks like that is the end of our questions. I think the audience, it was like a marathon here going through, reading all those questions coming through. So I really do want to thank. I look at we're at 7:01. We're right on time here. So truly an engaging audience, engaging questions. What a great presentation, Joshua. Alexis, thank you for being here to field questions. CVA's lobby. Focus Government Affairs and CVA's policy and legislative intern, Joshua Levin. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'll go back to the audience real quickly. My one ask at the beginning of this is the education that you learned this evening. Share it with your family, your friends, and your neighbors. Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world, and we can change the lives of animals who have no voice here in Connecticut. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I appreciate all of your time, and thank you again to our presenters. Thank you to the CFA board and the CVA board for their presence here, and would not be here this evening if it wasn't for their existence. So thank you, everyone. Great teamwork. Have a good evening. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.